So welcome everybody. I'm thrilled that you're joining us for this webinar, given how I'm also sure many of you are all looking outside the window right now and seeing that we've got another beautiful day on our hands. Today, I'm very thrilled to be joined by Laura Vassallo, who heads up our pre-award team in the Office of Research Administration. And what we want to do in today's webinar, which I've been told we're in a webinar format today, is give you guys an update on some of the changes that are coming with regards to the formatting of biosketches, something that you all should be thinking about, and Laura's going to walk us through a demo of how to make those changes. And then I'm going to then take the ball and then talk a little bit more specifically about issues related to budget justifications, and then also the facilities and resource pages that go into NIH grant applications. As I hope all of you know, or at least many of you know, the college largely has created a template for you to use for that section, so you don't have to spend your time tracking down the statistics of the university's current ranking and funding within the college and so forth. So we have all that for you. And then what I'm hoping we can do is spend a little bit of time. I want to give you some higher level updates of things that are going on both in the larger university research community and then locally within our office. And then happy at the end to entertain any questions you have. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Laura. Laura's going to walk us through, as I said, this first part having to do with the biosketches, and then we'll move on to the other sections from there. So Laura?
Okay, thank you, Dave. Thanks for the introduction. What I'd like to spend a few minutes today doing is actually walking through how to create your NIH biosketch in SciENcv. I'm sure everyone's heard about SciENcv, but I don't think it's being used to its fullest capacity. And it's very important to actually start using SciENcv for a number of reasons. First of all, SciENcv will ensure that your biosketch is compliant. It will ensure that you only have 5 contributions to science and you only have 4 publications. It will ensure your biosketch is on the most recent template, so you don't get annoying emails from me saying, fix your biosketch. It also allows you to just click and add your publications and click and add your research awards, which I'm going to show you once we log in. And possibly the most important reason for using SciENcv is it's going to be mandated by the NIH probably in the near future. The NSF is very close to doing it, and the NIH will as well. So they're going to come down and say all biosketches must be created in SciENcv. So the sooner we get started in this process, the easier it will be. So I'm going to just jump in. David has graciously allowed me to use his biosketch as an example, and I will just take David's biosketch and create mine, create his in SciENcv. I'm not sure if anybody wants to, they can easily follow along with me if they want to pull up their NCBI account and their biosketch. And it's actually, I was pleasantly surprised about how easy the system is. So first off, real quick with NCBI, most of you probably have your NCBI linked to your ERA Commons, but if not, it's important to do that because SciENcv will pull all information in from ERA Commons. So I'm just going to log in. Oh, apparently I am already logged in, which is nice because I was nervous about having to type the password. So here, everybody's familiar with NCBI. Here at the bottom right, you will see SciENcv. You can see that I started a test bio for David, and I'm just going to click Manage SciENcv. And like I said, it's very straightforward. And I must say, I apologize in advance, this might be a little more boring than our standard interactive webinars, but also feel free as I'm going along to post a question. I have it open on my other monitor. I'd be happy to answer it as we go along. So I am going to create a new document. So the nice thing, another thing about SciENcv is you can have multiple versions of your biosketch. So we can just call this June 2021 R01. And here are the formats that are currently available in SciENcv. You also notice that the NSF, they have current and pending support. Very soon, well, it'll actually probably be closer to 6 months. NIH other support document will be available. You'll be able to create that in SciENcv, which will also save a tremendous amount of time for our office, because that's something that we generally support you guys on, but it can be a very time-consuming process. So you can see what's happening in the future with SciENcv. We are going to start with the blank document. If we wanted to, we could just pull up the old one. Again, and this is very important to click external source, because if you have information in the ERA Commons, as I said, it will just populate it right into SciENcv. And for now, we'll just keep it private, and we are going to create the biosketch. I was not aware. No, sorry. Okay. Okay, and this is the page that comes up. You can see it's our June 21. You can change it anytime, private, or if you want to share. So I'm just going to walk through these, cut and paste, not go through the whole thing, and hopefully in about 20 minutes, we'll have a biosketch that we can then download and we can customize as needed. The nice thing here, this is populated with David's name. You can click edit if for some reason you don't want to be there. You can just save that. And then,
oh, interesting, Laura, not to interrupt, it actually didn't update my address. It still had me at Penn.
ah, did you update ERA Commons?
That's a really good question.
That's where it would be. So, but yeah, so anything that's in the ERA Commons should funnel over to SciENcv. Okay, so it looks like in ERA Commons we have your undergrad, your PhD. But we can always, I'm going to actually pull up David's biosketch. So it's really easy. I'm just going to do one example to show how easy it is to add your to add your degrees. Now again, this sometimes the drop downs are annoying, but if you just start typing, you'll come up with, if you just start typing Bachelor's of Arts, you will come up with Bachelor of Arts. And where did we, I'm going to move us. And you can also, the nice thing is if being on the big screen, I'm at work, you can just plop it right in there. Whoops, and we need the year. 1990. Sorry, David, everybody knows how old you are now.
Yeah, I actually was just thinking that.
Sorry about that.
Man, I'm getting old.
So I'm not going to go through. I'm not going to go through adding another one, but we can see how that works. So again, the personal statement, and as I said, I was actually pleasantly surprised at how easy this interface is. So I'm going to drag the personal statement. You'll see this is plain text. So at this point, you can't bold anything if you want to. But when you're done, we can download a Word version that you can edit as needed. So there is the personal statement. The best thing about this is you can just select citations. So when you select this, it will bring up all the citations that are in your NCBI account. And I found it's easier to just organize it by author. So essentially, we can just go through and click each one. Sometimes when there's a lot, but I've been, you can just choose text over here and search for it. And there it's right there. So we can choose that one and I'll just choose another one. Don't use this biosketch, David. And the nice thing is it won't let you check more than 4. Now, for those publications that aren't in NCBI, for example, we'll look for Falconbridge. Did I say that right?
Yes.
We can see that he's actually, that publication is not in NCBI, but we can add that citation. Let me just go back and let's see. Changes. That should be enough to pick it up in PubMed. There it is. So then we just click that. It'll add it to David's NCBI account. Then we can close that. And then with any luck at all, it is in here. And then they're right there. I'm not going to choose any more because it'll just kind of be wasting a lot of time at this point. Section B, this is the part that could get a little tedious, might take a little time, but it is probably worth it just to spend the time in the beginning, because once it's in there, it'll be in there forever. So it looks like probably from ERA Commons, there might be a few things to do, but we can delete this one for now. And essentially just, add another entry. And again, the fields are pretty straightforward. It's very easy to add these things. So we'll just click this first one. And again, you can just lost the R. You can just move things over as needed. So either copy or paste. I'm just going to do that. And then all we need is 95 to 97. And then it adds, and the nice thing is it adds it in order. So you don't have to worry about making sure it's in order. It'll automatically put it in order. And the same is true for these other experience. I'm not actually going to go through and cut and paste these. But again, I would apologize in advance if this is the part that might take a little bit of time, but it'll be so well worth it in the end, because it will be in SciENcv. So I'm not going to waste time cutting and pasting either the other experience or the honors. But it is just a very nice interface to use. Okay, there are a lot of questions. Sorry, I actually can't read them and do this at the same time. I don't know why I thought I could, but I'll answer them at the end. So contribution to science. Again, nice thing about this is it'll allow you to change the order once they're added. But I'm going to switch to the second contribution of science, because there is another feature of this which is very useful. Whoops, hold on. Working live is very disconcerting, I must say. So that is in there. And then we're going to select citations, but we'll look for this one for Dr. Trow, who, whoops, again, does not seem to be in NCBI. So we can add it through PubMed. We'll try that. Oh, shoot, wait, you know what I have to, it's not supposed to be in this one. It's not supposed to be in PubMed. Since there's so many publications in PubMed, you actually have to make sure you do cut and paste. So it's like, okay, so it's not in PubMed, but what SciENcv allows you to do is if you go to my bibliography, and I'm sure you guys have done this before, you can just add it, you can add it manually. I'm not going to go through the process of cutting and pasting, but you can add this manually. It will be in NCBI, and then it will automatically be in, you'll be able to click it in SciENcv. So this kicks us back to here, but once again, we can just go to the June, and you don't have to save things as you go. It saves things automatically. So everything we did is saved. So what I'm just going to add some citations again, just so you can see what it looks like. I'm just going to throw some up in here. And actually, I'll even show you what happens if, sorry, you can only, there we go. And then you could save the citations. And again, at this point, we always know you're in compliance. So in terms
Laura, actually, it's interesting. There's a little bit of a glitch there. So that citation C is actually a paper that Gabriel is on, but I am not. But because Gabriel's work was supported by supplemental funds tied to a grant that I had, I think the system automatically assumed I was an author.
It may.
So if you notice, I'm not on that authorship strike.
Oh, and you didn't add it. You didn't put it in your NCBI?
No.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I think that's like perhaps a little bit of a something for everyone to think about when they're doing this, is just to make sure that they double check and that it's not pulling papers that you yourself are not on as an author.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I'm not actually familiar with NCBI at all, so I've learned a little bit as I'm doing this, but yeah, that may be what happened. And that actually kind of leads into the next section. So the one change that we're told is coming for the biosketch is that research support and scholastic performance, that section is actually going away. So in November, we did a virtual NIH conference, and we heard in multiple sessions that Section D will no longer be a part of the biosketch. And supposedly it was going to happen in January, but obviously it hasn't happened yet. But for now, this is still part of the biosketch. I expect it, we haven't heard anything, so it'll likely even be there for the June submissions. But the really nice thing about SciENcv is if you have NCBI hooked up to ERA, you will see all your NIH grants automatically appear in this additional information, research support and or scholastic performance. And it'll show each competitive segment, non-competitive renewal, and you can see the RO1s. It's very light for me, which I don't like, but it might be just a function of my monitor. So you can go and just select whichever ones are applicable or whatever ones you want to include in your biosketch. What this won't have is NIH funding where you're a co-investigator. So this is only going to pull where you're an investigator, but you can add that through your NCBI by linking any of your publications to that award, and then it will show up here. But that's like a whole nother, if anybody needs the link, I have a link for how to do that. And then it'll show up in here and you can just click and add it to your biosketch. So what I'm going to do is just click a couple as an example. But the nice thing is this will actually, we'll pick one that is, let's say that is ended. There's a couple that are done here. Now the one disadvantage, and I'm not sure how how SciENcv is going to fix it, is you really don't know where you are page-wise until you download the document. So that at this point seems to be a disadvantage, but they may figure out how to fix that. Now you can also, if you go to user, you can add, so I had added the DoD award, you can add awards manually. And again, you can just pick this up from your biosketch and funding source, add it manually, and then it'll be there, and then it'll always be there. So I'm just going to select this one as well. And then we just go done. So the nice thing is it's going to automatically categorize them by ongoing research support and completed research support. And you can move them around, as needed. So essentially that's the nuts and bolts of SciENcv. So now we're done. You can either download a PDF, or we will download the Word document. And then make it a little bit bigger. I'll click it. And there it is. It's not letting me click in there. There you go. And essentially it's on the right template, which is always good. And then here again, this is a Word document. So this can be edited as needed. But you can see how the positions and employments, it really looks exactly like the biosketch that I started with. This is blank, but contributions to science. It doesn't indent them, but I guess they don't need to be indented. And then there's your ongoing, and it basically left aligns everything. And I get a few biosketches this way, so I think some faculty are using it, SciENcv. And then as needed for the ones, you can add a description, right here. If you have to cut and paste the description, you can do it from there. So that is kind of all I wanted to go through today. There are some questions. I can actually try to answer them during David's section. But I hope if it would be really beneficial for everyone to start using SciENcv, because it is going to be the wave of the future, especially once other support is in there and when it's required that you use SciENcv. And again, here is, this will be the only time you can figure out how you are page limit wise. But I was about to say any questions, but nobody's.
Yeah. So Laura, let me, I can tee these questions up for you. So we might as well handle them right now before we move on to the rest of the presentation. So one question, well, there are two questions along the same lines, which is, when do you expect that we will all need to make all of these changes? Do we know yet?
I wouldn't be surprised if it's a year out where they say you must. I mean, NSF is going to be a couple months, but NIH might be closer to a year out because they still have to. They're not going to make SciENcv a requirement until they officially announce that you don't need research support on there. And right now, SciENcv still has a section for research support. So it's going to be, and they're going to give us plenty of time. So it might be something that's announced in 6 months, and then they say 6 months later it's required. So I think they would give us at least 6 months to get on board with it.
Okay. And do you, and then another question that came in is, what if the degree is from another country that may be different here and is not present in the given list? Can it be inserted? So essentially, we've got a faculty member who has a degree that was awarded from a university in another country, and there may not be an equivalent. Is there in the United States, or in the pre-populated list, is there an ability to kind of enter something manually?
The only way to enter it manually would be to do it after you download the Word document, and then you would just have to put it in here. There, to my knowledge, is not a way to add it in SciENcv, so it's always in the drop down. But it looked like there were a tremendous amount of degrees in there. But if for some reason it's not, it would just have to be something that's manually edited. You can leave it blank in SciENcv and then fix it in the Word document.
Okay. And then another question that's come in, also noticing that different formats are being used in different references. Sometimes caps are in titles, sometimes not. If you correct these references after importing, will it retain the revised format? So if you so I think what the question's getting at is, if you download or you pre-populate and then you start manually editing, does it also then save those manual edits?
If you're doing it in NCBI or SciENcv, it should.
Okay.
So yeah, I would imagine any change you make, if you actually go to your NCBI account, into your manage your bibliography. Okay. And like I said, I'm not nearly as familiar as faculty are with NCBI, but any changes made in here, I think would stay in NCBI. If you have to change it in the Word document, obviously that's going to be local on your computer.
And then there are two questions that seem to be somewhat related here about where you made the comment that in the other support section, as a PI, it automatically appears, but it looks like co-investigator roles do not. And if that's the case, can you edit those, add those in through the Word document part?
You can, right? Once you have the Word document, you can edit just as you normally would. But you can also, so if you go to manage, you can add awards to citations that are not yours. Correct. So it looks like, David, you've linked some awards to these citations, or was that done automatically?
I don't know. That's a good question. I didn't do it. So somebody, either it happened automatically or somebody very graciously did it for me.
So if there was a publication and you want to link an award to it, you can just click the publication.
Yeah.
Go to manage awards. And then you can add an award. So you can look for any grant that's out there. So if you're a co-investigator, if you're a collaborator, even if you're a consultant or whatever, and you were part of a publication that was supported by an NIH award, you can just type in the grant number, the first and last name of the PI, search it, and then you will link it to this publication. Then it will show up in the on the SciENcv page, it will show up as an award.
Mhm.
And so that's the way to do it before it gets to the Word document.
Okay. And then Laura, a question here. Can you clarify what kinds of interim research projects are allowable in a biosketch? Are conference presentations and posters ever allowed? What about papers that are accepted and not yet published? Can you give us a little bit of a refresher on what's allowable versus not allowable in the publication listing?
That's a great question. And I'm going to actually do it this way because I think I do believe in press are allowed, but like I always end up having to do, and then actually, let's get back. Hold on. I'm going to go to Manage SciENcv, create new document. And I forgot to point this out when there was a spot where it had the NIH, maybe it's here. It had a link to, oh, here we go. So here's the biographical sketch instructions. So, but I think actually, Sherry, click in on the question and answer. I think it has to be published. I think it are only things that are published, but I actually could be wrong about that. But
I thought that was the rule myself for a while, but it could have changed and I just haven't noticed.
We're gonna personal statement.
I mean, my sense as a reviewer also is that reviewers do not spend a lot of time and energy sweating that stuff.
Right, if it's in press.
Yeah.
Right. For each kind of, say publication or research product. I mean, I do know research products are often posters.
Yeah.
That's kind of from the NSF. So poster presentations or presentations are research projects. Note that while you may mention manuscripts that have not yet been accepted for publication, you may cite only published papers to support each contribution. You may mention manuscripts. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I learned something new every day. Note that you may mention manuscripts that have not yet been accepted for publication as part of your contribution. So in the text part, when you're in the narrative, you can mention manuscripts that have not been accepted. You may cite only published papers to support each contribution.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I think that.
And then one other question, a couple other questions still are coming in. So Steve Lepore points out that sometimes when we collaborate with our colleagues who are more on the clinical side of the street, they oftentimes don't have a NIH bio already prepared, or it's underprepared, and we have to kind of carry that burden for them. Do you know, Laura, if we will be able to create an NIH bio for somebody else when SciENcv becomes required?
Well, we could, like I just did, for you, if we have, but generally when we receive biosketches from collaborators and, we are not fooling around with them or editing them as needed.
Yeah.
You would need you would need their ERA Commons username and password to access their SciENcv.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little over and above what we generally, as much as we love to support PIs.
Yeah. No, I see your point, and it is a little bit of a slippery slope. And one of the things I'm going to talk about in my remarks is how we need to make sure that we're not overstepping boundaries and changing documents that shouldn't be changed by PIs. And I would think that changing somebody's NIH bio without their consent is a no-no. If you've got a clinical colleague and you kind of have a negotiation with them of, hey, look, I need to clean this up for you. I'm going to clean it up for you, but I'm going to send it back to you for your approval. I think that's more acceptable. But I think, once somebody has given us a document that has their personal information on it, or they've signed it, so if it's a letter of support, our PI should not be changing those documents, and certainly shouldn't be changing those documents without the express consent of the person who created the document in the first place. So while it can be a burden and a drain on time, I think, we're probably on safer footing from a research compliance perspective, by just going back to those people and saying, hey, I know it's going to take time, but you really need to do it. It's kind of like city training.
Right.
Everyone's got to be city trained who's on that, on the proposal or in the study. And, we can often be challenged to get our clinician colleagues to do that, but, it's an important thing that needs to get done.
Yeah.
And then there was one other question that came in, after Jingwei asked, after I made changes manually in a Word document, can I reload back to the SciEncv website to keep the version being most up to date?
Unfortunately, I tried to do that, and it doesn't seem like that is possible. And that is a drawback. Because there is I can't get to it because my stupid thing won't go away. I'm sorry. I'm trying to find, I can't get this to go away, so I can't get to my tabs. But you can upload it from external data, but it's not a Word document. So once you download it, you can't re-upload it to have those changes. There we go. To have those changes in your SciEncv account. I'm going to do it this way because it's driving me nuts. Just so I can get to. Oh, actually, I guess I lost it. I don't think I lost the whole account. But yeah, I have not found a way to do that. It would be nice, but they're not that smart to have an algorithm to take a Word document. This is where it was.
And then there's a question while you're doing that, Laura, I'll just answer. Somebody said, should PIs share their bios with their grants administrators? And I would say certainly yes.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, and I'm going to answer this more from a grantsmanship perspective, I customize my bio for every grant that I'm on. And I change out the publications, I change out which sections of the 4 sections of my research experience I highlight. I always make sure I'm using the most up-to-date references in that sub area of my work. And while I've had members of my team make those edits for me in the past, I always read it and double check it and finalize it myself, because I have seen where I know what I want to highlight for my role on a specific project and to strengthen the overall application, whereas another member of my team or somebody in ORA, they may not have that nuance, and they might just say, oh, okay, well, it looks good, it looks clean, there are no typos, there's no stylistic errors. And I do think that failing to customize your information, whether it's a biosketch, whether it's a justification, which we're going to get to in a moment, whether it's a resource page, I think that can actually put a bit of a dark cloud over a grant, that you really, you didn't really put in the sweat effort on this. And I think for those of us who realize that writing grants is in fact a fatiguing process with a lot of attention to detail, I know I, as a reviewer, have been frustrated where by an application that I'm reviewing, when it's clear that somebody was not careful with the level of attention to detail that I would expect. And as a result, I think it colors my overall impression of the science. So I think a good rule of thumb is to, think of a little bit of do unto others, which is how would we want to represent ourselves in a project, and therefore we should expect other people to be at that similarly high standard.
Right.
So Laura, anything else with this before we pivot over to justifications and resource pages?
So real quick, I'm sorry, I'm taking up time, but I was looking at Jingwei's question. So it looks like you can, so for this description, you can add text and it will actually save it. So it will be in here. So I think that's what might have been what Jingwei was saying. So for these grants that are in ERA, you can add a description and it will stay in there.
Okay.
But you have to do it. You can't do it if it's in the Word document.
Okay.
So I'm sorry. All right. Apparently I can't delete that, so you're gonna have to put something in there. But I'm sorry, David, please continue. I'm just gonna.
Okay. So so Laura, thanks a lot. I think this is really helpful. I'm glad to know that we've got some time to do this. I would actually encourage people though that you maybe do this well in advance of a grant deadline. So in case this takes longer than expected, in case this is, in case there are some glitches in the system, that you don't do this at the 11th hour with an application. I recall that when when NIH Bio switched over to their new format, I think I burned a better part of a Saturday afternoon just switching writing a template, a new NIH Biosketch, and getting used to the format. So I think it's a nice luxury to do it not when you're on a deadline. So I'm going to now share my screen, and I want to talk a little bit about budget justifications. And I think many of us are very comfortable and happy with sharing materials with one another so people can customize it. But there are a couple things that we've begun to notice that I want to just highlight for all of you and have you give it some thought. One of which is typically in my justifications, and this is actually a grant that just went in where I'm a site PI, the contact site, our colleagues actually at the University of North Dakota, of all places. And so we're a secondary site, so we're a subcontracted this award. So as you can see, I'm the site principal investigator, and my effort is for the project is up here. I've noticed that some people have started really writing a lot of detail in this first paragraph. And I think using this as an opportunity to brag about yourself is perfectly appropriate, but I don't know if it should be more than a paragraph or two. If you notice, I'm not talking about publications, I'm not highlighting certain things. It's written at a very high level. I think if you want to expand and dig down a little bit deeper, that's fine. But we have seen some justifications recently where people are writing 2 and 3 pages and it's 2 or 3 pages of a brag paragraph, or a brag section, not really the specifics of what they're doing on the study. And I think maybe a more efficient strategy is actually to say, for further details, please see my NIH Biosketch if you want to highlight something. So that was one thing that we wanted to highlight for all of you. And then in terms of the second paragraph, I think it's really important that people are thoughtful in how they line up what their responsibilities are going to be on the project with the amount of effort that they're requesting. So I don't think it's appropriately detailed to say I'm a co-investigator and I'm spending 2.4 calendar months on the project, period, no other detail. I think what you're trying to accomplish with the second paragraph is to create an image in the reviewer's mind that if you're requesting, 20% effort, that they have a sense that you really are going to be spending a day a week on this project. So if you say, we have a team meeting, my local team will meet once a week for an hour. I'll have a meeting with the larger team every other week for 1 hour. I'm responsible for supervising graduate students and research assistants or other team members. I think you really want to convey that sense that the amount of time and effort that you're spending in the specific tasks line up with the budget elements as well. Because I think otherwise you do run the risk of opening the door of getting criticized that you've underfunded or you've overfunded your effort. And then all of a sudden you get the dreaded comment from a reviewer that says, I propose that somebody reduce their effort or increase their effort. And I think, we want our reviewers to be focusing on the science and not get distracted by issues in the justification or issues on a biosketch or issues in the facilities and research section, which I'm going to share with you in a moment, that otherwise distract them from focusing on our good science. So I'm just going to check the Q&A here and see, I think there is a question that just came in. For other personnel, how important are the job titles such as lab manager versus project manager versus technician? I would actually say not very. I think what's more important is whenever possible, you should name your personnel. And you should not only name your personnel, but you should brag about them a little bit and try to make the case that all members of your research team, when possible, are used to working with you. So, I've worked, with Jackie for over a decade now. And so it's a great luxury to be able to write in, although she's not on this budget, it's a great luxury to be able to write in and say, I've worked with Miss Jackie Spitzer for over a decade. She's had this responsibility on numerous other NIH funded projects. So therefore, it puts to rest any questions of whether or not I'm going to get somebody high functioning in the role, particularly if it's a project that really needs to hit the ground running. So if you've got a lot of things going on in that first couple months of the project, and you said that your project manager is to be determined or to be hired, I, as a reviewer, am going to be concerned about that. And I'm going to say, well, if you're not going to hire that person until the grant arrives, and we know at a place like Temple, that can take several months, are you really going to be able to hit the ground running the way that you say? So I think anytime that you can, and remember, by writing them in here, you're not altering or modifying their terms of employment in any way. You're just making the case that you've got a well-established team around you. So I would say the titles are a little less important. And if you're concerned about a title, then just make sure you put enough language in there so a reviewer knows what you mean by lab manager versus project manager versus technician. So with that, and given I don't see any other questions about the justification, I want to pull up another document for all of you. And this is the facilities and resource page, which I think is another important part of the application. And I'm going to share with you in a couple of minutes some really interesting observations that research leadership in the university has made in the last 6 months. But, the word on the street, and even, unfortunately, I think the reputation among people within our own university is that our research infrastructure is not as robust as it really is. We have a lot to be proud of as a research institution, and we should use that to our advantage. And I would make the case that, we are getting to the point within the college that we should be consistently getting 1, 2s, if not 1s, in terms of our research environment. That we are good at what we do, and we should be proud of that, and we should use that to our advantage when we're marketing our science. So what you could see here is an example, and again, this comes from that grant I just submitted. This first paragraph really talks about the university as a whole, that we have tier 1 status with Carnegie.
David, sorry to interrupt, but I think we still see the budget I still see the budget justification.
Oh, you do? Thank you. Let me go ahead and see if I can change that. Thanks, Laura. Better? Okay. So if you look at this first paragraph here, this is all high-level university look at us kind of language. So in top 4 of research productivity among all 4-year institutions in the nation. In the last year, Temple received $285 million in extramural funding, highest level in the university's history, more than doubled over the past decade, all of which is going to make the impression to the reader that we are a really, really solid and accomplished research environment. Then beyond that, we've got another paragraph that talks about research at the college level. We're always happy to give you more detail here if you want, but you could see, not only we talk about Laura's leadership and where we've come, we talk about our overall size of our programs, our research funding level, and that the average award is the largest at the university. And then it gets a little more specific. So here I talk a little bit more about my role within the college. I then start to talk about CORE and my colleagues at CORE. So you can see it almost kind of cascades down in terms of talking about the specific resources that we have. And given that this project in particular is a resubmission, I actually added this paragraph here that talks about how not only do we have more early career development awards in the area of obesity, but with my colleagues at North Dakota, I'm actually on an application where I'm mentoring one of their junior folks. So I'm using this as an opportunity to strengthen my connection to my colleagues at the University of North Dakota. And then you can see here, I talk more specifically about what does CORE have, a relationship to the bariatric surgery program. And then this is also new, that where I talked about the fact that the OVPR has put even more of an investment in the bariatric surgery program in the hospital recently. So again, really trying to say that we are the right place and the right people to do this grant. And so you don't have anybody saying, well, you know, Temple, I don't know much about the university, how robust is the infrastructure? Really try to bludgeon that potential question with this section as much as possible. And again, this is available to all of you through the Office of Research Administration. I'm also always happy if you have specific questions, you want to run something by me about how to do this. I'm happy to share, but you'll notice again that cascade of university to college to then department, and then you start getting into the weeds of what's the actual equipment that you have available to you. This section, because of those 2 or 3 paragraphs, actually longer than I typically write. So with that, I think another question has popped up. Actually, let me see. I'm not sure if one has.
I don't think.
No, maybe not. So I want to then end and invite all of you to submit any other questions, but I want to end with a couple of other higher level observations I want to share with all of you. So first of all, as I just alluded to, this past year from a research perspective has been very, very interesting. And some of you have heard what I'm about to say, but so indulge me if it's repetitious. At this time last year and in the months after, you know, we all went home for the year, there was a lot of concern, not only here at Temple, but nationally, that clinical research in academic settings was going to grind to a halt. And you know, not only was Michelle Masucci very concerned about what might happen in the short term, but was also very concerned about what would happen in the fall, even under the assumption that we might all be back on campus last fall, which clearly didn't happen. You know, now here we are a year later, we're still not back. I'm very pleased to tell you, however, that while without question there have been members of the college and the university community who have been hit harder because of other demands on their time, research funding as of February at the university is up $25 million year to date compared to last year. So despite all of our greatest concerns that things were going to grind to a halt and we weren't going to get things done, research funding as of February was up $25 million year to date. And within our own college, requests for application or submissions are up, and requests for funding are up as well. So I'm very pleased to share that really good, encouraging news with all of you. And I want to congratulate all of you who have, you know, found the way to maintain a very high level of productivity and pursued other funding opportunities for your work. It's nice to say that our worst fears with regard to that part of the pandemic actually were not realized. Now, the downside to that is obviously, since our volume of submissions are up both at the college and the university, we have not been able to make additional hires to support that volume. And as a result, the system, both within our college, but also the university review system, is very much taxed. And so with that in mind, I just want to remind all of you about the importance of working with us well in advance of your deadlines. You know, we pride ourselves in the office on customer service. We pride ourselves on our responsiveness. We pride ourselves on the personal touch that we can bring to our work. And I just ask all of you, as you think about your submissions, that you please make the best efforts that you can to work with us in advance of deadlines. Yes, we can ask for waivers if you're missing deadlines, but a 2-day waiver does not come with a guarantee from the university that your grant is going to go out the door. And if you happen to ask or need a 2-day waiver at a high volume time, such as an NIH submission cycle, you are going to have to hold your breath a little bit about whether or not your grant's going to go out. And I would also just invite you to think about the fact that when we push those deadlines that way, you are potentially making somebody work into the evening or making somebody in our community spend time on the weekends processing your work. And I know that, I'm always very sheepish of when I have to ask my team members to put in additional time outside of 9 to 5. I do it because that's what I signed up for, but I'm not always sure that the rest of our team members have signed up for that. And so I ask that you just be thoughtful and respectful of other people's time. One of the things I think is important for all of you to know is that Laura and I and Sherry and Carol every Monday morning review the list of all the grants that are on our radar in terms of submissions. While we know kind of the bulk of the submissions right now have to do with between now and say the summer, some of the fall submissions, people who have told us they're going to go after an R01 for October, or they've got a big deadline for November, they're already on that list. And we have and I can tell you, although I don't know the numbers, maybe if Laura or Sherry do, I would venture to guess that over time, 25% of those grants never go in. So people tell us they're going to submit something, and then something comes up, they get busy, they miss they're going to push it back to another cycle. We have no problem with that. We really don't. We would rather have this long list, knowing in advance that, David Sarwer's thinking about an R01 for October 1st. And if he changes his mind and it comes off the list, we just kind of, okay, it just comes off the list. We don't give it a second thought. So when you think you have something kind of brewing, please give us as much of a heads up as possible as we go forward. And then I guess the last thing that I want to just touch on, and it brings us a little bit full circle with the discussion about, doing people's biosketches and how we're all going to make this shift to SciENcv. I think it's really, really important that we remember from a research compliance and a responsible conduct of research perspective, it is not appropriate to be changing documentation that belongs to somebody else. So if you ask for a letter of support from a colleague, and I acknowledge that there are often times that, people will ask me for a letter and I'll say, well, will you draft that for me? And then they'll draft it and then I'll edit it and I'll add my signature. Once my signature's on it, I assume that it is not going to be changed. And in fact, I'm not going to authorize anybody to change it. So I will be troubled if I find out that somebody changed something that I have signed and assumed was finalized. And I think it's important that all of us extend that courtesy to one another. So once you've asked something from a colleague and they've signed it, please do not make changes to it without that express permission or express permission. I acknowledge sometimes it's as simple as changing a date, but it's important that you get that confirmation from somebody. And similarly, we just ask within the office that you do not change our budget forms. There are a number of different reasons why we handle the budgets. But and while we all like to have a sense of ownership of our work, one of the things that's always important to keep in mind is that grants are awarded to the university, not to us as investigators, and that the university has systems and procedures in place in some respects to protect us, to make sure that we're not doing anything that's inappropriate or could call into question research integrity. So please do not mess with our templates. It actually can create an awful lot of work for us in terms of having to undo any changes that people have made. We are very, very fortunate that we have an incredibly talented Office of Research Administration team. And we just need to make sure that we put them in position to do what they can moving forward and not have to clean up the messes that we make as PIs because we're overstepping what we should be doing in terms of our work. So with that, we're getting towards the top of the hour. I haven't seen any other questions or comments come in But I'm happy, and I'm sure Laura is as well, to entertain any questions or comments that you have. While I'm waiting for that to populate, let me just again congratulate and acknowledge the Office of Research Administration team. They have done just a phenomenal job over this past year of keeping up with the work and making sure that we're providing the best possible service to our grants and our projects. And while I'm so impressed by their professionalism and their accomplishments over the last year working from home, I also know that I miss them tremendously. While we're on the phone together several times a week in different contexts, I miss the sidebar conversations in the kitchen. I miss the goofy things I walk in on when I'm back in their section of the dean's office suite and so forth. And I'm sure that's something that all of us are looking forward to, that we can get back in the office and reconnect in a way that we've certainly not been able to do that.
There is a question, and this has come up recently, this has been a recent change.
Yeah.
The difference between the facilities and other resources document, and then there is a separate equipment document. Typically, we have not been submitting equipment documents. Equipment being, what permanent equipment is available for you to do this research, whether you're using computers, superstations, or MRIs. But over the past few months, OVPR has requested that we upload an equipment document. And someone has asked, what's the difference between equipment and facilities and others resources? Again, what I think of equipment is, permanent equipment, large machinery that you need to do your work that is not on the budget. Yeah. Whereas facilities and other resources are essentially labs and computers and things that are in the document that David mentioned. But anybody who's submitting an NIH grant, we will be asking for an equipment document. And a lot of times in public health, it's just NA. And literally there's a document that says equipment, not applicable. But OVPR has been asking for that document. And we have added it to the checklist for the next round of the June submissions.
Great. So with that, I want to, again, thank you, Laura, for walking us through the SciENcv part. I'm sure it's going to be a pain point for many of us as we go on in, but it was so clear that you did such a wonderful job with mine. You can go ahead and finish that whenever you want.
Yeah. Oh yeah, all the time I have.
I'm sure Jackie will thank you in absentia.
Right. Yes.
So and then next Friday, our trauma-informed care group, which continues to do really just fantastic work, is coming back and is going to present to us on updates of the things that they've been trying to accomplish. And then we have another session at the end of the month, and then 4 weeks from today will be our Research and Evidence-Based Practice Day. And I'm thrilled to announce that we yet again have a record number of submissions. So we're going to do this virtually, very much like we did last year, but I think it has just as much potential to be just a fantastic event in what's going to be an outstanding week of events for National Public Health Week. So with that, why don't we all just sign off? Good seeing all of you virtually, and I'm glad to have a nice attendance today, but get on out and enjoy the weather and have a nice relaxing weekend, and we'll see you all soon. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you very much for coming.